This session will work through the last two parts of the GROW model, that is, options and will. By the end of this session, you'll be able to describe the process of exploring options, evaluate the reason for exploring the options and will to lead to progressive solutions, and identify powerful questions to ask in exploring options and in gaining commitment. Let's start off with the options section. The purpose of this stage is to help the person think of options open to them to move forward. What different states would be more useful for them? What other things could they do? What other ways could they think about the situation? So you want to ask questions that will help the person think about new ways and new solutions to help them achieve their goals. In this process, when it comes to options, it's a bit like brainstorming in as much as quantity is really important. You'll want to help the person generate as many options as they can. Why would that be important? Well, the more options you have, the better you are likely to be able to find one or a combination that will be inspiring for the person to move forward with. If you've just been talking about their current reality and what's happening that they want to change, then the likelihood is that they may not be in a great state. So you'll want to help the client get into a much more resourceful state before they start thinking of options that are available to them. If you don't do this, it's likely they'll just say something like, "Well, I can't think of anything I can do differently." Or they will give you things that they've already tried in the past that haven't worked. The easiest way to help them change state is for you to change yours, and that will reflect in your voice. So you may have been talking to someone about the problems they've been having and asking questions in this type of voice. And when it comes to asking questions about what they can do differently, you'll want to change your voice and perhaps ask it like this. "So that's how things have been happening. How would you like to approach things differently now?" If that's still not producing the results, then you may want to do other things that will get them into a better state for thinking about options, like taking a little break, or have them move the way they're sitting, or for you to lighten the mood in some way. Whatever it is you do, it's very important to get them to shift their state. You cannot come up with inspiring options when you're in an unresourceful state. So here are the types of questions that will help you explore options. What can you do to change things? What choices are open to you? What other choices are open to you? Make sure you get at least 4 because of what we said about the need for quantity in these things. And then you may want to run through the strengths and barriers of each option by asking questions like, what will this option bring you? What are the barriers to this option? How will you overcome that barrier? When you've finished that, then you may want to ask them about how they could combine some options. Would that provide them a better solution? And then you'll want to assess the attractiveness of the options. And one way of helping them here is to ask them to mark the options out of 10. And then you can ask them about which option they'll choose. Now we come to the final stage of the coaching model, will. This is a stage when the person will choose the option that they're going to go for, and for them to think about how they're going to be or what they're going to do as a result of the choice that they've made. At the end of the coaching session, you'll want the client to go away being fully inspired and motivated and happy that they will be able to bring in the changes that they want. So on this part, you're working on commitment, engagement, and inspiration. So you'll want to ask questions that will help them get to that place. This may come just from them feeling a lot better about their goal and what they want to do. Or it may be that they'll do that with an action plan. Much coaching literature puts forward that action plans are essential and motivating, and for some people they certainly are. And as with goal setting, you'll want to make sure that they are taking the action for resourceful reasons and in a resourceful state. I've found that sometimes it's much more important to change someone's state or frame of mind, and once you've done that, they will take different action quite naturally. For example, if someone is being held back by their relationship with their boss, then if they can change their state in regards to that relationship, for example, instead of feeling angry or frustrated by the relationship, they feel positive and confident they can move forward. The relationship has to change anyway, and it may be more useful to notice what happens as a result of the change in state and then decide if there is action planning that's needed. Sometimes coaches will finish a session with an action plan, and the client is thinking that if they follow through with the plan, then everything will be okay. But what happens if someone has an action plan all sorted out and, for example, in it they've decided they're going to talk to this particular person, get them to agree to a new contract, and then have a team meeting so that they all understand what's going on, or whatever it is that their plan is. And then when they start on the plan, it doesn't go according to it, because when they talk to the person, that person doesn't want anything to do with the new contract. It's much better that someone leaves a coaching session knowing that they will be okay whatever happens, rather than thinking that only one course of action will achieve what they want. To be able to stay in a resourceful state whatever happens, that's far more important. Sometimes it's thought that the act of action planning and then coming back to the coach for the next session to report what they have done is motivating in itself. And in some situations this works, and in others it's demotivating. If the person doesn't complete the action plan, they may beat themselves up or be in a very unresourceful state to progress. This is known as an away from motivation. That is when the person is moving away from something they don't want. In this situation, the client is taking action, so they don't have to go back to the coach and say they haven't completed their action plan. This may work for a short while, but it's very unlikely to be sustainable. You're normally better to go for a towards motivation strategy, where your client is so inspired and feeling good about the result that they want, that they don't need something like feeling bad if they don't do it to motivate them. Here are some questions you may want to use to help someone move towards action. You might want to ask things like, why do you believe this is the right option? What's your action plan? What are the strengths of your action plan? What resources do you have to reach the outcome? What additional resources are needed? Where might you need help? How will you motivate people to help you? And then you will want to work on the commitment, because you want someone to leave the session really inspired and committed to what they're going to do. So one way of approaching this is to ask them, how committed are you to your action plan? And to ask them to mark it out of 10. And if they say any number that is not 10, then you will want to ask them, well, what will you do to make it a 10? And make sure that you keep on asking that question until you get their answer. Because if it's not a 10, it's unlikely that they will follow it through completely. And lastly, a very useful question to ask is, what's the first smallest step you will take? Because that will start to motivate them, and they will realize that they only need to take a small action to get the whole thing started. It's also helpful to ask questions which get the client to think about what resources they already have and what resources they'll need in order to achieve what they want. You may want to consider areas of objects and things that they may need, people who can help them, role models who can make it easier for them and to shorten their learning curve, personal qualities that they have, and finances. So here are some questions for each of these areas. So with objects, you might want to ask, what will you need in terms of equipment, buildings, or technology? As far as people are concerned, you might want to ask, who can help you in the team, in your family and friends, or in business contacts? And as far as role models are concerned, you may want to ask, who's already done this, and how can you learn from them? And for personal qualities, you might want to ask, what qualities do you already bring to this? What skills and qualities do you want to develop? And how will you do that? And as far as money is concerned, you may want to ask, what financial resources do you need? And how will you secure them? Now we've been all through the coaching model, right the way through. So here's an exercise for you to start to embed all this learning. First of all, write a critical evaluation of the use of action planning in coaching. Then find someone to work with who is happy for you to experiment with, and run a coaching session with them using questions all the way through and using the GROW model. What worked well and had a positive impact on the person? What did you learn from the process? How are you going to be able to practice your coaching skills more? And what is your plan for becoming more proficient? Write this as a learning log.